Hello and welcome back. I am Mama Two Howries. Today's video is going to be about Sentinel, cbouzy, Twitter, and more through examples from my own Sentinel analysis. Now, if you have been on Twitter or you have been on YouTube and you follow like the LawTube type community, or you follow the Depp v. Heard trial, then you probably know who cbouzy is and Sentinel and lawyers that had been covering this. But recently there has been some stuff that has come out about cbouzy, who is the owner of Sentinel, and how Sentinel runs his business. And there seems to be a lot of problems other than the way he's conducting himself on Twitter. So we can see here that this is his analysis from his own website, Sentinel. He is in the normal rating of 0% to 24% at 11%. And of course, the owner of this company, Sentinel, is going to be rated normal, although he does target harassments. So let's jump in and tell me what you think. First step in all this, we are going to look at Twitter and their developer platform. These are the developer terms, more about restricted uses of the Twitter APIs. And Sentinel falls into this API category. Now, if you go into your Twitter account and you go to the settings and to the privacy and security part, you will run across this. And most of us are probably unchecked, like I am here. This one is from my own Twitter account. And by not checking this, you are not giving permission for the sharing of additional information with Twitter's business partners. So, data sharing with business partners, allowing sharing of additional information with Twitter's business partners. Allow additional information sharing with business partners. Twitter always shares information with business partners as a way to run and improve its products. When enabled, this allows Twitter to share additional information with those partners to help support running Twitter business, including making Twitter's marketing activities on other sites and apps more relevant to you. And then it'll have a part where you can learn more if you want to. So, I do not have it checked. Therefore, I do not give permission for Twitter to share my information with business partners. Now, I do not know if Sentinel is a business partner of Twitter. I am not thinking he is. But this might get discovered soon through things that are happening in the background. So check yours, see if it is checked. If it is checked and you do not want your information shared with the business partners, make sure you unclick that button. Have it blank. Distribution of Twitter content. If you need to share Twitter content you obtained via the Twitter APIs with another party, the best way to do so is by sharing tweet IDs, direct message IDs, and or user IDs, which the end user of the content can then rehydrate. Example, request the full tweet, user, or direct message content using the Twitter APIs. This helps ensure that end users of Twitter content always get the most current information directly from us. We permit limited redistribution of hydrated Twitter content via non-automated means. If you choose to share hydrated Twitter content with another party in this way, you may only share up to 50,000 hydrated public tweet objects and or user objects per recipient per day, and should not make this data publicly available, for example, as an attachment to a blog post in a public GitHub repository. So basically it is saying that you cannot share this information publicly or in like blog posts. Well, Sentinel does share it publicly. And so that's a problem, because not only can you go in and look up it yourself, you can go in, if you have anybody's Twitter handle, and get this information. And anybody can do it, and nobody has given permission. So, let's move on. There are a few points to keep in mind about redistribution of Twitter content. You may only distribute up to a total of 1,500,000 tweet IDs to a single entity within a 30-day period unless you have received prior express written permission from Twitter, which Sentinel has not done. And if they have, Twitter has a problem. Individuals redistributing tweet IDs and or user IDs on behalf of an academic institution for the sole purpose of non-commercial research are permitted to redistribute an unlimited number of tweet IDs and or user IDs. To request permission to share Twitter content as outlined above, please use the API policy support form. And it'll have you look at that. Now, it says, to the extent you are permitted to distribute Twitter content to a third party, note that this content remains subject to developer agreement and policy, and you must ensure such third party has agreed to the Twitter terms of service, privacy policy, developer agreement, and developer policy before receiving Twitter content. So, if you are a business partner of Twitter's and you have permission to redistribute these things, or you do it through a third party, the third party also has to agree to the conditions that the partner did. And so that is what they talk about in all this. And so when they talk about hydrate, it means get complete details. Example, field of a tweet. many Twitter API calls that return tweets do not return all the fields. So statuses lookup may be used as a secondary call to get to these. Let's see. Apparently you can stop hydrating and such. There is more on that, and maybe we'll dive into that on another video, because that is something I really haven't heard that term used. So we will dig more into that. And if you know about what rehydrated and hydrated is in Twitter context and API information, let me know in the comments so we can learn more. Measuring the Twitter service. Do not use the Twitter APIs to measure the availability, performance, functionality, or usage of Twitter for benchmarking or competitive purposes. For example, you should never use the Twitter APIs to calculate aggregate Twitter user metrics such as a total number of active users or accounts. Calculated aggregate Twitter tweet metrics such as the total number of tweets posted per day or the number of users' engagements on an account or account engagements. And lastly, measure or analyze spam or security on Twitter except as permitted in the Twitter rules. And it has a link to that. Sentinel has those things. He's got little pie graph charts and everything on it. So I think this is breaking the Twitter rules as well. Surveillance, privacy, and user protection. At Twitter, protecting and defending the privacy of our users is built into the core DNA of our company, and our developer and data products reflect on that commitment. We believe that Twitter data can be a powerful force for good in the world, from saving lives during the flooding in Jakarta to helping the USGS track earthquakes, to work with the UN to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. However, we prohibit the use of Twitter data and the Twitter APIs by any entity for surveillance purposes or in any other way that would be inconsistent with our users' reasonable expectations of privacy. Period. Do not be surveillancing things. That's not your job. And you do not have permission to do that. We describe prohibited uses of our data and developer products in the developer agreement, including prohibitions on investigating or tracking Twitter users or their content, as well as tracking, alerting, or monitoring sensitive events such as protests, rallies, or community organized meetings. His whole website is about tracking and monitoring. So that is prohibited in the developer agreement. Other categories of activities prohibited under these terms include, but are not limited to, investigating or tracking sensitive groups or organizations such as unions or activist groups. Wonder if that includes hate groups that you create. Background checks or any form of extreme vetting, credit or insurance risk analysis, individual profiling or psychographic segmentation, which that is what we have every Twitter user has this individual profiling of our Twitter accounts with information on them. So these are, again, prohibited things that Bot Sentinel does. And do not use facial recognition. These policies apply to all users of our APIs. Any misuse of Twitter APIs for these purposes will be subject to enforcement action, which can include suspension and termination of access. For additional information, for law enforcement authorities seeking information about Twitter accounts, visit, and it has the link. Because sometimes in criminal cases, or even maybe even in civil, social media can be used as evidence, but there is a proper way that you are supposed to go about it so that everybody is doing it the legal way. Off-Twitter matching. Off-Twitter matching involves associating Twitter content, including a Twitter username or user ID, with a person, household, device, browser, or other off-Twitter identifiers. One example would be associating a Twitter username with a business customer records. Example, John Doe in your customer records is matched to John Doe on Twitter. We want people to feel comfortable to create a separate and, if they choose, pseudonym identity on Twitter if you intend to associate any information about a Twitter user with an off-Twitter identifier. We require that you get express opt-in consent from the user before making the association. For example, you could get this consent if the user shares their Twitter handle directly with you as a part of a sign-up process for your service. We have not signed up for anything that has to do with Bot Sentinel. And I guarantee you, you can go on there and you will find yours. And you will find everybody else's. So, moving on to the next paragraph. In situations in which you do not have the user's express opt-in consent to link their Twitter identity to an off-Twitter identifier, we require that any connection you draw be based only on information that a user would reasonably expect to be used for that purpose. If a user would be surprised to learn that you are using information they provided to link their Twitter account to an identity off of Twitter, don't do it. In addition, absent a person's expressed opt-in consent, you may only attempt to match your records about someone to Twitter identity based on information provided directly to you by the user, records about individuals with whom you have no prior relationship, including data about individuals obtained from third parties, do not meet this standard. So, I do not have a relationship or given expressed opt-in consent for Bot Sentinel to use my information. It was not provided directly by me. And yeah, sure, the Twitter handle thing, not a big deal. But it's the being labeled and analyzed by something that we don't even know how it's analyzed, really and truly, as well as things that are in my posts and everybody's posts that get linked and send you to different places or show some of your life that you don't necessarily give permission. People have the right to stay anonymous if they want to. If a person in their personal life wants to, do whatever on Twitter, but then they also have a business and they don't really want the connection there. Or, like they said, John Doe. Well, let's say John Doe owns a clothing store. But John Doe does not want to go by John Doe on Twitter. He wants to go by something else. Because everybody knows if he was to go by John Doe on Twitter, that everybody would know that he is the John Doe that owns the clothing store. And he wants those things separate. So he creates a different Twitter handle, like Apparel Junkies or something. And so linking these two together, when they do not have permission to link them together, and especially in legal capacities, and you sharing that publicly, is not something that you have permission to do. People have the right to hide their identity on social media platforms. And many people do, because they don't necessarily want everything to be connected, or maybe they have strong opinions, or people can dox, and they don't want information about their families being found out because somebody linked two and two together and shared that information, and it becomes a horrible thing. And I'm sure you've heard about cases that has happened, and it's not right. But let's move on to the next bold bullet here. Public data. Public data in this context refers to information about a user which you obtain from a public, generally available resource, such as a directory of members of a professional association. Information on Twitter about a user which is publicly available, including tweets, profile information, including a user's bio and publicity stated location, display name, and username. So you can figure some of this stuff out, but if none of this is done with permission, and maybe you have your stuff private or limited, and you don't want other people seeing it, maybe only your followers or whoever, and you don't want your real life to be matched to your online life, then we can run into some problems. Now, is there stuff that you can easily find out because of public data? Yes. Does that information need to be spread? No, because it can land in the wrong person's hands and can become very dangerous. Let's move on to another important section. GDPR. GDPR stands for the General Data Protection Regulation, and it came into effect on May 25th of 2018. And it builds upon and modernizes existing EU data protection and privacy rules. It also specifically addresses the export of personal data of EU citizens outside the EU and sets clear guidelines for companies who operate between the EU and other global markets with different legal structures and approaches to data transfer and its commercial use. So in the UK, they have this protection that you need to follow certain guidelines, and if you don't follow them, then you are violating this GDPR. And this covers like all of the EU, which is like the UK and like Europe and stuff like that. Now, the thing is, if you are in the United States, the United States as a whole does not have something like that that protects us. Now, California has probably the most popular widely known protection of data privacy. I think I have seen that Virginia and Colorado do, maybe Utah, and there are others that are looking into it. And pretty much every state has something. I know in Texas there's been some acts and stuff that have been put through, but I think there needs to be, especially in this technology and the way of the world, and more as time goes on, more technology and stuff that's going to be used, and we as citizens and consumer users should feel safe using these things. And so I think eventually there will be something. I don't know if it'll come from like the Supreme Court, or it will just be something that every single state has and it just all matches. I think that it is coming for every state, but usually there is something that you have protection over your data being shared. HIPAA's one in the medical field, and there's some other ones as well. And if your state doesn't have anything like this, write to your Congress and say, we demand these privacy and data protection to be in place so that our stuff isn't being shared without our permission. So definitely look into that. It does have information here if you are in the UK and stuff, and advice for the EU advertisers and their agreement and questions and answers and all of that. You can go there. But definitely check your individual state or country's policies. Most countries have it. The US just does not, for whatever reason. Twitter's approach to privacy and the GDPR. Protecting and defending user privacy is the heart of our work. From protecting users and being anonymous to offer meaningful privacy and security controls, and our overall commitment to transparency. These are foundational principles and built into the core DNA of our company. We also partner with civil society, we stand up to governments, and we continue to evolve our efforts around documenting our work. In preparing for the GDPR, we formed a cross-functional team made up of senior team members from across Twitter to make sure we were not only working towards GDPR compliance as an end in itself, but in a way that involves our principles and overarching mission as a company. While our teams had been working on this behind the scenes, we made updates across our core product, policy, and operations. Our goal as ever has been to meet our commitments to our users and provide an industry-leading level of transparency and user control. So what companies like Sentinel do takes the transparency away. It takes the user control away. And we will get into why and how Sentinel takes these things away. Core focus areas. Product. For EU users, our product will be updated to meet requirements of the GDPR. We will create a bespoke experience that offers increased transparency around what we do with your data and how it is stored by Twitter. Policy. Our privacy policy was updated in line with the GDPR to include changes around data portability, the overarching term of access for EU users, and data and anonymity requirements. We will ensure your privacy continues to be protected. Transparency. In line with our ongoing commitment to transparency, we want this process to be clear for our users. To that end, we will keep you updated, including through in-product prompts, updated blog content, and ensuring our public-facing materials are digestible and fit for purpose. All right, so here is what it is going to look like when you go to